This is Jay Sekulow. Unrest in the Middle East continues. Our guest, Congressman Chris Smith. This is not getting discussed on the mainstream media. Not only are they wrong legally, but the fact that they would do this is outrageous. This is an overreaction and really nonsense. How would you react if this was your son or your daughter? It's the offense of knowing the truth. It's the offense of having an alternate worldview. Saying God bless you to someone is not a violation of the law. Hey, welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. We're talking about the situation in Egypt. We're talking about the Muslim Brotherhood and this allegiance that's forming. They're only going to get 20% of the representation. That's what the president says. It's a strand. It's a minority. Name a government where the Islamic Jihad or the Muslim Brotherhood have come into a situation with 20%, and in 5 years they are not controlling the government. See Lebanon. And it's going to go from Egypt to Jordan just like that unless the United States is decisive, which includes saying you're not getting our $2 billion. We've got a big stick to wage, and for Jordan, for some reason, the White House is not waving it.
Absolutely right. And folks, it's time for us all to take a stand and get educated. That's why we have a brand new DVD documentary called The Export, Radical Islam's Map to End Democracy. We've been preparing for this for you, not just because of Egypt, not just because of nuclear Iran, because we know that this is a global threat. We know the Muslim Brotherhood is operating in the United States of America.
There is not a moderate element inside of the Muslim Brotherhood. The president talks about, well, there's strands of the Muslim Brotherhood that's dangerous. After the break, I'm going to get into the president's analysis. He's wrong. We have offices in the Middle East. We represented Christians in the Middle East. We do represent Christians in the Middle East. That's an incorrect analysis of what exactly is going on here.
Harry's calling from Louisiana on line 4. Harry, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Hi, Harry.
I'm listening to the radio, and I want to know what is the Muslim Brotherhood and what is Sharia law, because a lot of us hearing about it and we don't know what exactly.
Okay, no, it's a great question. Who is the Muslim Brotherhood? What is Sharia law? Jordan, why don't you start with Sharia law, and then I'm going to talk about the Muslim Brotherhood.
Sharia law is a religious-based code of conduct and a legal code. Derives directly from a few sources, primarily the Quran. Then you have the Sunnah of Muhammad, which is kind of the lives and stories of Muhammad, so how he acted and what other people wrote down about his own behavior. And then some also sources from the Hadith, another version of more scholars talking about Islam. So they take that, they take from that the laws, and then each Islamic country comes up with their own version. So some put it into constitution. Some, for instance, like Egypt, which is everybody's considering this a secular country. Well, Article 2 of their current constitution, of Mubarak's constitution, says that all law shall come from Islamic law. So that will be the source of the judiciary for everything. So there, when it's so broad, the judiciary, that branch of government, is able to use Sharia law and their interpretation of it when they want to, and then can also disregard it in other times. So what we see is something that is not codified. You cannot look and say this is all Sharia law. It differs from place to place.
All right, and on the Muslim Brotherhood, we're lawyers, so we analyzed their charter. They were formed in 1924. Their goal, creating an Islamic world and making sure that everyone under that conquest is subservient to the Sharia law, Jordan just mentioned, and the Quran. They are the ones responsible for the assassination of Anwar Sadat. It is a global conquest movement that is using political niceties and democratic-sounding words to advance their agenda, which is radical and global Islamization. This is a group that is dedicated. They are much more politically savvy than Al-Qaeda. Just as dangerous, but more politically savvy. So what we have to be aware of is their methodology. You get 20%, then 20 becomes 30, then you do Lebanon and you take it over. And that's what really is important.
Yeah, I mean, here's a text. This is called Jihad is the Way. It was written by the head of the Muslim Brotherhood in 1995, Jerusalem Post. Translated this for everyone. Quote, honorable brothers have achieved Shahada, that's martyrdom, on the soil of beloved Palestine, that's Israel, during the years 47 and 48. 48 when Israel became independent, in their jihad against the criminal, thieving gangs of Zion, that means Jews. Still today, memory of them horrifies the Jews, and the name of the Muslim Brotherhood terrifies them. That's from their leader, not in 1920, in 1995.
We've got a lot more discussion ahead and a lot more legal analysis. As you can see, our officers are fully engaged on this around the country and, frankly, around the world. And we're glad we're able to bring this broadcast to you around the world as well to keep you posted on the situation in Egypt, how it affects the Middle East, and ultimately how it affects the United States. So stay with us. We've got a lot more ahead. Well, joining us now is someone that really needs no introduction. It's our good friend, Congressman from New Jersey, Chris Smith. Congressman Smith, thanks as always for being with us.
Well, thank you, Jerry. Thank you for the great work you do and the center. It is worldwide, and it's very, very effective.
Well, we've enjoyed working with you for so many years. I want to get right to it here. As the situation continues and the unrest continues in Egypt, the president was asked a direct question, and that is, do you consider the Muslim Brotherhood a risk? And the president makes a statement saying, well, there are strands of the Muslim Brotherhood that are problematic, but basically you can't condemn the entire movement. Those of us that are engaged in work in the Middle East, there's no strand of the Muslim Brotherhood bylaws or ideology that is in any way compatible with U.S. constitutional principles and the vision of our founders, and frankly, within anybody that appreciates and loves a republic that's formed on a democracy. What's your sense of the danger of Egypt and the Muslim Brotherhood?
Well, first of all, I think the president is extraordinarily naive, or he's just acting that way and there's some other agenda. I don't know what. It reminds me of those, who thought maybe Hamas can be worked with, Hezbollah, or any of the other jihadist groups.
And they can be until they're taken over.
That's right. They have downplayed their anti-Israeli and their anti-Zionist view, their anti-Jewish view. They're very anti-Semitic, and also their anti-Christian view. The Coptic Church has certainly suffered, and anti-American. All of that's been downplayed because they're very smart and they're very clever. And I've been amazed at how we are almost like giving them the green light to become the next ruling government in Egypt.
How dangerous is that?
It's very dangerous.
Muslim brother gets in there.
It's another Iran. If they were to take over, remember, they use bully boy tactics to get their way. They'll use bombs, incendiary devices, guns, and these people are jihadists. Yeah. We have no fight with Muslims. We have a problem with jihadists. And that's what they are.
So why is the president acting as if it's only strains of the Muslim Brotherhood that disagree with the United States? I mean, he gave that interview live right before the Super Bowl.
I know.
Strains of the Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, we know when we're talking about Muslim Brotherhood, we're talking about people who are happy to declare that the U.S. is an enemy.
Yeah. Again, I'm not sure what his end game is, but certainly, I believe, maybe unwittingly, he is enabling the demise of any hopes of a free and democratic Egypt. And remember, we saw this happen with the Shah of Iran, and he had a terrible secret police called the Savak, and there were problems, and we should have been more outspoken trying to get reforms. But it's like deja vu all over again. Mubarak, and I have met with Mubarak in Cairo. I have met with Mubarak when he comes to Washington. I've raised the Coptic Christians. I always raise the anti-Semitic depictions in his state-run media. At least it wasn't as bad as it could have been, but we needed to work with him. I wish he had done a lot more than he did on the democracy front. But frankly, to go from Mubarak to a dictatorship where Sharia law is imposed, remember, what caused the 2 million people to die in southern Sudan, where you'll be visiting again? It was the imposition of Sharia law. That's what Khartoum was trying to do. It is very, very dangerous. And added to this, a few weeks back, Hu Jintao, unelected president of China, a dictator who made his rise to power, crushing the Tibetans immediately prior to Tiananmen Square. 4 months before, they were beating the Tibetan nuns and the monks and killing people and torturing them. That was his meteoric rise began to becoming president of the People's Republic of China. Barack Obama rolled out the red carpet when he came, gave him all the military honors, a state dinner, never mentioned publicly Liu Xiaobo, his fellow Nobel Peace Prize winner, who I actually nominated. I got a group of members to nominate him, and a lot of other people did as well. But a great man who's languishing in prison, never mentioned him. It was so bad that the Washington Post did an editorial on January 19th that said, President Obama defends Hu on rights. President Hu on rights. There he was. Perfect opportunity. He even said things like, well, they have a different system than we do. It's called dictatorship.
Yeah,
it's called a dictatorship.
And it's pretty much what he's saying in
and then he said something,
with the Muslim Brotherhood.
Same thing. And he even said they have a different culture. What an insult to every Chinese man, woman, and child, especially the dissidents suffering in prison.
As if they don't know what freedom should be.
Exactly. Right. And he's doing the exact same thing now with the Egyptians. Like, well, they don't really get democracy. They don't,
and George's doing
it's
a
an
lot of work
insult
with,
to them as well.
Yeah, and you're doing a lot of work with the Coptic Christians, and they are very worried about what's going on.
Certainly they didn't love Mubarak. I mean, certainly they felt like they were not protected, especially from the Muslim Brotherhood and radical elements. But at the same time, they look at this, they see the writing on the wall. Whether it's successful businessmen there or very poor people who say, you know what, Mubarak was horrible, but if we end up stuck with the Muslim Brotherhood because the United States is going to continue all this economic aid and let the Muslim Brotherhood control the military, we're finished. Yeah. We either have to leave or we'll be dead.
And the same thing will happen as happened in Iraq, with all the Christians being ousted.
Right.
And it'll even be worse because there won't be even
really
a semblance of an American presence. You know, the Pope Shenouda has said that they were favorable towards Mubarak because at least he didn't allow him to build a lot of churches. There were restrictions, but there was some protection. You take away that protection with the Muslim Brotherhood, and there will be all-out
war on
whatever.
Christianity.
And I'm very worried about that. We had a hearing just a few weeks ago. Congressman Frank Wolf chaired it with the Tom Lantos Commission on the Coptic Church, and it became very clear people are upset with Mubarak, but frankly, they want to work within that system. Now we're going to see potentially a matriculation from a very tough leader who didn't practice human rights to all-out chaos and
looking like
perhaps a terrible situation towards the Christians and Israel. I read the Jerusalem Post almost every day online. The commentators now, not Netanyahu's got to stay, politically above the fray, but former people in the cabinet and Mossad and others are writing these op-eds. They are very worried because now, they are surrounded again, and it was the peace treaty with Egypt that kept the semblance of peace for so many years.
The first thing they get rid of.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And so and the Muslim Brotherhood is, very dangerous, and I can't believe we can't find our tongue to say that, and the administration's saying we need an orderly transition. The Secretary of State, that's the same Secretary of State, on her way to her first trip to Beijing said, I'm not going to let human rights, quote, her words, interfere with global climate change issues and selling our U.S. debt to the Chinese. So we are fraudulent. I would respectfully submit, and very duplicitous when we say now let's take out that human rights trump card and put that on there.
As if it is a trump card.
Like they were ever taught. And then one other thing, and I pointed this out at a hearing today, Obama cut the human rights and governance budget by half to Egypt. Big mammoth increases. That's
not out there. Nobody knows
that.
No,
it cut it in half. It was $56 million to Egypt for governance, NGOs that are working on the human rights issues. He cut it down to 25. President Obama. And so if you really care about human rights, you fund the very groups
that are promoting
that will help protect those rights.
The organizations that would form opposition political parties.
Exactly, that would not be the Muslim Brotherhood.
Right.
Exactly, Jordan.
Congressman, we appreciate it. Thank you for your leadership on that issue as well.
Thank you very much. Thanks, John.
I want to encourage you to be in prayer for us as you're hearing from the phone calls that are coming in, from the discussion that's taking place, the situation in Egypt. We have offices, by the way, in Jerusalem that deals with the entire Middle East region. Offices in Africa. We've got offices at the European Union in Strasbourg, France. Offices in New York City at the United Nations. We are fully engaged in this issue, working to make sure the Muslim Brotherhood is not put in control of Egypt and our flow of oil through the Suez Canal, and that's really what's at stake here. So there's a lot of issues at play here. It is not just a international issue, it is domestic as well. And we've got a lot more discussion. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Why is the president even considering having the Muslim Brotherhood as part of the discussion process, part of the government in Egypt? I cannot figure this out for the life of me. Athan mentioned during the break here, you talk about, is there Sharia law in the United States? Well, yeah, New Jersey court has already tried to apply Sharia law. They were eventually reversed, but the trial court judge actually applied Sharia law to defend a man from sexual assault against his wife. Now, that's one case. We've had another case where they've used it on an adoption issue. We've had a third case where they did it for an honor killing and used Sharia law as a defense. Now, there are states that are taking direct action through amendments saying we're not applying Sharia law here, and those are being challenged. Who are they being challenged by? CAIR. Whose care? The Council on American Islamic Relations. Dan, you deal with them at the UN. This is one tough group.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And this is something that our listeners and our viewers have to understand, because it's easy to think, listen, this is only over in the Middle East. It's over where large segments of the population want to be subject to Sharia law, although I would question that as well. That's not true. We have seen this over and over, this cycle internationally through our work at the UN. It always starts small. It starts with a foot in the door, and then it expands and it grows until it takes over control. And we're already at that point in the United States of America, Jay. They have that foot in the door. There's no doubt that they're seeking to extend it, and CARE and the Muslim Brotherhood right at the forefront.
Why do you think the president is willing to even think about working with the Muslim Brotherhood? He's asked a direct question. Let's listen to this again from Bill O'Reilly on the Muslim Brotherhood. They're dangerous, aren't they, Mr. President? They're trouble, aren't they? And then the president's answer, well, there's some strands that are. Take a listen to this.
The Muslim Brotherhood, great concern to a lot of people. They're a threat to the USA.
I think that the Muslim Brotherhood is one faction in Egypt. They don't have majority support in Egypt. But they are well organized, and there are strains of their ideology that are anti-U.S. There's no doubt about it. But here's the
strain. Go ahead.
The strains of their ideology. Jihad is the way. Again, this is a Muslim Brotherhood text from 1995 written from their leader. It should be known that jihad and preparation toward jihad are not only for the purpose of fending off assaults and attacks of Allah's enemies from Muslims, but are also for the purpose of realizing the great task of establishing an Islamic state and strengthening the religion and spreading it around the Middle East. No, that's not what they say. Around the world. We are an enemy because we are allies of those Zionists that they talk about, those gangs of Zion that still horrify the Jews. When you hear the name Muslim Brotherhood, we're part of that enemy.
Also from Jihad is the way. Allah is our goal. The Prophet is our leader. The Quran is our constitution. The Jihad is our way. And the death for Allah is our most exalted wish. So dealing with the Muslim Brotherhood is not dealing with a movement that has strands of danger. It is called danger, and here's the problem. The President of the United States, our President, with all due respect, Mr. President, is willing, it looks like, to negotiate with these groups. They will take over Egypt, which is one of the largest population bases in the Arab world, and this will be destructive. And then we then have to get Congress to exercise its oversight, and if there's a $2 billion, folks, allocated for Egypt, Congress can say, sorry, we're not going to do it.
Yeah, not a dime should go to the Muslim Brotherhood. Congress can take the lead on that. You start with Pete King and the the Committee on Homeland Security. Joe Lieberman in the Senate should do the same in his committee. And frankly, Darrell Issa, who runs the Oversight Committee in the House, should step in and engage as well. Listen, if the Muslim Brotherhood is involved, Congress should not even give the president an opportunity. If the president might be wrong on this, but Congress takes the first step, they can shut it off right at the pass.
And listen to Pete King, Congressman King from New York, when he's having these hearings. And they're calling this a witch hunt. Groups like CARE were unindicted co-conspirators with their staff serving long-term prison sentences for recruiting for terrorist organizations. Why is he having these hearings? Why does he think this is so important? Well, he wants you to know this. Bite one.
My goal, first of all, is to make it known and make the public aware and to begin a public debate on the fact that al-Qaeda is actively recruiting within the Muslim community. This isn't just me saying this. Attorney General Eric Holder, a very liberal attorney general, by the way, said just about 5 weeks ago that he can't sleep at night because of the number of young Muslim men who are being radicalized to take up arms against their country. These are American citizens, people living here legally in this country who are taking up arms against their country.
You know, he shouldn't be sleeping at night, and the president should not be willing to cut a deal with the Muslim Brotherhood. Folks, I am radically concerned about these radicals. I think this is the greatest threat to democracy that we have seen, not just in our lifetime, but since the founding of the United States. This is an event in Egypt right now that is an equivalent of an earthquake, because if the radicals, and it looks like they're right now, unless the White House changes its tune, get in there, the danger on this can be incredible.
Well, and Janet Napolitano said this today: the threat of terrorism is, quote, at its most heightened state since the 9/11 attacks nearly a decade ago. Its most heightened state, the threat of terrorism right here in the United States of America.
All right, folks, here's what we want to do. We've got a great series of resources for you. I need you to do a couple of things. One is contact the White House through signing our petition, telling the president no deal with the Muslim Brotherhood. He's wrong on this. There's not a strand of Islamic jihad within the Muslim Brotherhood that's legitimate. So saying that there's strands that are dangerous is wrong. It's a dangerous organization. It's a terrorist organization, number one. Number two, the Egyptian people can say, no, we don't want them in our government, because we also know we're not getting U.S. aid. So that's part of this. We've got a great documentary we're finishing up for you right now. It's called The Export. It's talking about this radical move to impose Sharia law on the rest of the world. Oliver North, John Ashcroft, John Bolton, on and on the list goes. Really well-known leaders that you're going to see in this documentary film. I want you to have it. This is a critically important documentary and very, very timely.
Todd's calling from Georgia on line 3. Todd, welcome to JSEC Live.
Hi, Todd.
Hey, yes, sir. I just want to ask y'all, what influence do you think Frank Marshall Davis and Louis Farrakhan and Reverend Wright, Khalid al-Rashidi have had on the president's opinion of the Muslim Brotherhood? And given that they gave Hamas almost $1 billion in the stimulus bill, are you worried that they're going to try to slip it in some other way?
Absolutely, Todd. I mean, you know, President Obama attended a church that printed the Hamas charter in their bulletin, in the church bulletin.
Say that again, Jordan, so everybody understands this.
President Obama attended a church that printed Hamas's charter, portions of their charter, in the church bulletin. That was Jeremiah Wright's church in Chicago. Certainly, the Hamas is a direct offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. In fact, in Hamas's charter, they say that. They say we are part of, internationally, the Muslim Brotherhood. They are an armed wing. It means Hamas means the Islamic Resistance Movement. So certainly, Todd, you're correct. President Obama has been influenced by people who feel like the Muslim Brotherhood is absolutely fine, someone that the United States can work with, and it's no problem that they're operating right here at home.
I'll take it a step further. While the president was not just attending, he was also a member of that church. And they're printing the Muslim Brotherhood's declarations and the Palestinian Authority's declarations, which look mild compared to the Muslim Brotherhood, by the way. And we're acting as if this is a legitimate exercise of free speech. These are radical subversives that are bent on the destruction of the United States. And what we got to make sure the president understands is the American people are not willing to tolerate this. And you got to ask yourself this question. Why would you even consider, why would you not answer that question when Bill O'Reilly asked it? Mr. President, very direct question. Muslim Brotherhood's a threat, right? Well, there's strains of the Muslim Brotherhood that are. That's not an acceptable answer when you've got a regime that is calling for the destruction of Western civilization as we know it, and the establishment of a new caliphate and an establishment of an Islamic State. And that's what they're doing. And we are naive if we think that that's not what's at play here. Listen, I went to Capitol Hill on a domestic matter. I said this on the last broadcast. On a domestic matter with leadership, and I brought up the situation in Egypt because I believe what happens and is happening now in Egypt affects us domestically. But here's the question I'm asking our audience. Why is it that you think the president will not answer that question of saying that radical Islam, the Muslim Brotherhood's a threat? But then I'm concerned. We've got to make sure our government affairs team that you head up needs to be on top of this, which you are, because we've got to make sure Congress, normally foreign affairs issues are kind of given to the White House as part of their authority. But the fact of the matter is this has direct impact on what happens right here in the United States.
It has direct impact, and Congress has a role because they allocate the funds on this. And I want to seize on a point you made, Jay. You talked about the incentive that this $2 billion is to the Egyptian people. The president says he doesn't want to take that money away from the Egyptian people. Well, you know what? If the president would say, I am not going to send that money over to you if the Muslim Brotherhood is part of your government, the Egyptian people would almost certainly not allow the Muslim Brotherhood to be part of that government. So it's important that they send that signal now, and Congress needs to hold the president's feet to the fire on it.
Which brings up the next question here, Jordan. You're dealing with a lot of governments around the globe with constitution drafting in Africa, around the globe. These rising democracies, that a lot of them are Christian-based, understand what's at stake if Egypt goes to the hands of the Muslim Brotherhood. They know what it means for them in their region.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. You've got a situation in Sudan, right? We've talked a lot about the southern Sudan, their independence vote. The official votes came out. 98.7% of the people voted for independence. Omar Bashir, the president of Sudan, who is still on the state sponsor of terror list, said he would recognize that vote. Guess what, though? The people in southern Sudan, they're nervous because there's now an Islamic extremist uprising happening in northern Sudan against Bashir because he's not Muslim enough, even though they have Sharia law there. And they're very concerned that if what happened in Egypt with the Muslim Brotherhood is transported right to Khartoum, you have a Muslim uprising there with extremists, and they try to cancel the peace agreement and, of course, recognizing the South secession.
Well, that's going to do it for the broadcast today. And I again want to thank the Trinity Broadcasting Network family, Jan and Paul Crouch, and the entire team at TBN, because as many of you know, the American Center for Law and Justice, we don't have to pay for airtime because you all are supporting the great work of the Trinity Broadcasting Network, which allows me to get this information out, but yet keep our lawyers in the field engaged in the practice of law. So it's a tremendous blessing and savings to the American Center for Law and Justice. So I want to encourage you to continue to support TBN. You can do that at tbn.org. And I want to encourage you also to continue to pray for the ministries in the network. of the Trinity Broadcasting Network. And while you're praying, we'd appreciate you praying for our lawyers here at the American Center for Law and Justice and our affiliates around the world. That's going to do it for the broadcast this week. Again, thank you, TBN family. We'll see you next week. This is Jay Sekulow again. I just want to thank Paul and Jan Crouch and our entire friends and family at TBN for allowing us to bring this broadcast to you. We also want you to know that we're here to help. And we really couldn't be doing it without you, and we appreciate everything that you're doing, praying for us and our lawyers. If you've got questions or you need information, contact us at aclj.org. If you want to call us, you can do that as well. I encourage you to do so at 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or aclj.org.